things have become so strange, so unreal, that the normal methods of analysis for having to frame and comprehend these things, rationalism, reason, measured contemplation, harsh analysis, casual analysis, prosaic analysis, they're no longer relevant to the world that we live in today. They're no longer relevant to the existence that has been foisted upon us since the 2020 assault upon humanity by the globalists using national governments as hitmen upon their own people. We don't live in a world where the previous tools to come to comprehend the complexities and situational realities of the zeitgeist can function anymore. We're in a very different domain now. We're like those of us in the tribes and people like us. We've been washed up, shipwrecked on a foreign land, and we've encountered people who do not speak the same language as us. And that's the rest of humanity right now, the other side of the division. And likewise, it's literally impossible for us to communicate with them. As you all found out, the greatest education ever revealed just how different you were from others that you were close to, and also just how different they were from you, over things such as the lockdown and the face nappies and needlecraft and other things pertaining to the war upon humanity that began in earnest in spring 2020. This inability to communicate using the traditional toolkits of communication and discourse and comprehension has created a situation whereby we've had to develop a communicative process of our own. We are moving into a parallel society, whether we want it or not. Those of us who have become dissidents of the narrative are being launched into this regardless, like we have no choice. And this is why we've been using things like palava and our own version of hobo language, needlecraft, and so on, foghorn leghorns, Windows 0, as our means to communicate, because the tools used to communicate with the rest of society are not applicable to our level of consciousness. Humanity split in two. You know that, I know that. And we didn't even move anywhere. It's just like what happened with the liberal thing. I'm still a liberal. They just changed the definition of liberal to fascism. But I'm still an old-fashioned 1960s JFK, Martin Luther King liberal. I'm the same. I haven't changed. And so are many of you. But what's happened is the rules changed. The goalposts moved. And suddenly you found yourself in a place where you were never wanted to be. Now, this lack of communication and this sort of organic, and it is organic, it is osmosis, move towards a parallel society. And believe me, it's the best thing that could ever happen to us. All you have to do is look at what's out there and what it's like. became very apparent to me the other day when I watched Joe Biden's recent speech. Firstly, that's the most coherent he's been in about a year. And I'll tell you why he was coherent. Because that wasn't him. That was whatever entity or force is working through him to say that. That was not the Joe Biden. You look at old videos of Joe Biden, say from 20 years ago, it was a different person. He had this kind of like big smile, sort of like a character, sort of like a Jack the Lad type. And all the stuff with the sniffing hair and all the other weird shit, that's all recent. I believe that there's an entity inside him that's not a human being. And the sniffing of the hair is part of that entity's behavior. Though whatever life form, wherever it comes from. And what you're seeing when he sniffs hair, and what you saw the other night when his full metamorphosis from Joe Biden, the old sort of like rogue charmer of the of Capitol Hill, to this incredibly dark and poisonous speech he made the other night, which basically declared war on half of the United States, dehumanized them as well, dehumanized them and declared war upon half of them. And that was not him. That was some entity working through him. And there was the body language, everything was different. He had been completely, whatever entity had entered him, it had become completely absorbed inside him. And you look at all the people he surrounds himself with, they all look possessed. They're all cackling, incompetent buffoons. And they're all in the forefront of woke. And woke itself cannot be reasoned with. And when you have a situation where people I know who claim to be scientific rationalists no longer believe in chromosomes because woke determines their belief in science. See, their so-called adherence and devotion to the scientific method doesn't transcend wokeism. If woke says that there's no X and Y chromosomes, they now believe that. So materialistic science is dead. And the scientific method is actually an excellent method for deducting all kinds of problems. Sherlock Holmes, elementary, my dear Watson. When we discard the impossible, when we discard and no matter what's left is when we discard the evidence that doesn't fit, and what left, no matter how seemingly irrational, is the truth. That's all been thrown out the window. We don't live in an age of Sherlock Holmes, We live in an age of, like, complete irrationality. And those things are very handy even for, toolkits at work and stuff like that, or your daily life, or dealing with neighbours and stuff. But they don't work anymore. So what works now? I think, when England, well, it wasn't England, it was Mercia mostly, when that part of the world was migrating from paganism over to Catholicism, Christianity, there was a thing called Anglo-Saxon dream poetry, and it was used as a kind of a software to help the Anglo-Saxon pagan mind dissolve or blend or fade into the Christian mindset more effectively. So you have these poems with titles like The Dream of the Rood, where Christ is portrayed as an Odin-type figure. And it's to lessen the shock of the new faith upon the consciousness of the world. So again, as art, art. You find that when many countries start off their independence movement, they're filled with quite artistic and cultured people. You often hear of the Poets' Revolution, that kind of thing. That's actually very common. It was very common in the founding of this country. You had poets, artists, and many occultists involved in the highest levels of government. And this is why William Butler Yeats has a permanent standing exhibition of his occult and Golden Dawn paraphernalia at the National Library of Ireland. because they recognized that his occultism played a part in the foundation of the state. And, you know, he had other people like A.E. Russell, who was also an occultist in the Golden Dawn, who was the father of the Irish agricultural movement. He was an agricultural scientist who worked in government here. And you had in America Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, and Washington, and all of them, they were all Freemasons. All Freemasons had a great distaste for democracy and begrudgingly and brilliantly invented a system that got around the mob rule as best they could. But they all hate democracy. All those people here in the United States and the founding fathers fought for democracy. They all openly hated democracy. I don't like democracy either. It doesn't. All you have, if you don't believe me, look where does your votes get you? You know, and don't tell me if democracy works and voting works. It doesn't. I'm extremely anti-democratic. Democracy, I mean, and United States isn't even a democracy; it's a republic. You know, look it up. But the old tools don't work anymore. You'll find like the best way I'm finding of approaching it is an artistic, poetic way of doing it. That's probably what the Rowan Ironicals were, and you'll find that's the best way you can do that as well. Is to sort of see it as if you're witnessing a dream. Because what Biden said in that speech tonight was so poisonous and so dark that it's hard to believe the lips that came from the lips of an American president. But he's not an American president. He's an entity. There's some entity inside him controlling him. And it wasn't the usual kind of rhetoric. It was, you know, like where he might mention, you know, the Middle East and stuff like that. It was out and out an attack on the American values and the American people. And it was basically Joe Biden holding up a Chinese Communist Party flag and saying, woke or die, to the point to the American people. Quite disturbing. I know people who are liberals who don't have a problem normally with like the Democrats and that, and they were even like that his speech didn't, it was a bit creepy and weird, didn't go down well with me. I mean, I don't like, they were saying things like, and hear people all over the internet, I don't like MAGA stuff, but I don't want those people harmed or killed or anything. And that's what Biden was asking for. So, you know, it was a declaration of war upon at least half the, well, actually most Americans, you know, and traditional American values, and done in a very dark kind of way, like a school teacher or a tyrant father would say, you're doing this and that's that kind of thing. So really the only way we can do this is to go into the world of dreams and poetry and art. A very William Blake. I mean, ironically, you know, it's like a Blakean kind of, or Yeats, you know, yeah, you know, where do we go? We go to the poetry of William Blake. We go to the poetry of William Butler Yeats. You know, we go to the world of the artist, the literature, the painter, the dreamer, and the esotericist, because that's the only place we can find any kind of toolkits that can fly us through this dream poetry period we're going through. It really is that case. That's why I'm restarting the Velocity of Now on BR313. The first broadcast will be up at midnight tonight in our time. And it's specifically designed, the new Velocity of Now Vaughn's are specifically designed to be very esoteric and very occultic, but also very much for the darkness, the winter of all the darkest winter of all sorrows that they're trying to foist upon humanity, as a light in the darkness, as a kind of a flickering twilight. That's why I'm calling it the Morning Star broadcasts, because they're about the dark night of soul is coming, but remember the morning star always rises in the morning, you know, to give us hope. That moment, that's like a star card in the tarot. The star always rises in the morning to give us hope in the dark night of the soul. And you know, Horus always sets throat at dawn. And that's, you know, the lacerations of the blood spewing forth from Set's throat causing the morning dawn. There's the poetry of the mythological world is extremely important going forward. This is why they're attacking the likes of the Tolkien mythos, and that will be a deadly thing to do, because they're attacking the fundamentals of the Western spiritual tradition, of the Western mythological tradition. They're doing it on purpose. But don't be surprised if everyone involved in that show all suddenly horrible things happen to them because of the profanity of what they're doing. And so this is the world we're going to have. This is the software we're going to have to use to get through this. It's not a bad thing, really. It'll grow us all as people, but it's the only thing that works, because as you know yourself, we can't be dealing with people who think being locked up in cattle pens, groups of 3 while watching a rock concert with their little ID pass. We can never reason with those people. Unfortunately, they're the majority of people out there. The parallel society is happening whether we want it or not. And it's like, so you might as well do it properly, like Crowley said about magic, because it's happening to you anyway. And so that's it for today. Go into the dream world, go into the land of, go inside yourself. I'm a great believer in finding happiness inside yourself. If you're the kind of person who can't be happy in your own company, you'll never be happy with any other company. And I think most of the people that are in the tribe are like that. We're people that are generally happy and content within our own company. We don't need other company all the time, like some do, like many do. So the dream, the while they try to foist the nightmare upon us, we'll have the dream of the poets. There you go. Take care of yourselves, and have a lovely Saturday.